Hey folks, how's it going? Fisher coming at you again. I've got a real short chapter. Well, I should say grammatically, a really short chapter for you today. We're back to reading To Kill a Mockingbird. We're almost finished with this thing, so that's pretty awesome. Chapter 29, right there. There are only 30 chapters in this book. No, 31 chapters in this book, so we're getting really close to being done. I got to tell you. So we've got 2 assignments this week. I'm a little too close to my computer. We got 2 assignments this week. And then, so Monday and Wednesday, and then next week, I'm not going to post an assignment for you guys on Monday because I figure that's a holiday. And whether we have school or not, it's still going to be a holiday. So I'm actually not going to have my office hours on Friday this week either. I'm going to take a long weekend for myself, and I think you should too. So don't do anything too stressful over the weekend. Just relax and celebrate and enjoy yourself. Hopefully the weather's going to be good, and that's what I want you to do. But for now, I do have 1 chapter of To Kill a Mockingbird for you, and it's only a few pages long. So, brief recap. If you recall, the last thing that happened was the children, Jem and Scout, were walking back from the school after the play, and Bob Ewell tried to murder him, to put it bluntly. He had a kitchen knife, and he attacked Scout because he could see her in the dark, and he came and he tried to cut her with a kitchen knife or stab her with a kitchen knife or something, and Jem managed to fight him. And then Jem got his arm broken and lost consciousness. And then some dude came and wrestled with Bob Ewell and managed to stab a kitchen knife right up under his ribs and into his heart. And Bob Ewell is dead. And that's the last thing that we found out. Heck Tate said it. Right now we're in Jem's bedroom. Jem is lying unconscious on the bed. The doctor put him under with some drugs. Scout's in there. Aunt Alexandra's in there. Heck Tate, the sheriff, is in there. And Atticus and Aunt Alexandra, I can't remember. Anyway, the whole family's in there. And that's where we're at. So, chapter 29, page 306. This is only like 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 pages long. So this is a good short chapter. This should be really easy for you. Aunt Alexandra got up and reached for the mantle. Mr. Tate rose, but she declined assistance. For once in his life, Atticus's instinctive courtesy failed him. He sat where he was. Somehow, I could think of nothing but Bob Ewell saying he'd get Atticus if it took him the rest of his life. Mr. Ewell almost got him, and it was the last thing he did. Are you sure? Said Atticus bleakly. He's dead, all right, said Mr. Tate. He's good and dead. He won't hurt these children again. I didn't mean that. Atticus seemed to be talking in his sleep. His age was beginning to show. His one sign of inner turmoil. The strong line of his jaw melted a little. One became aware of telltale creases forming under his ears. One noticed not his jet black hair, but the gray patches growing at his temples. Hadn't we better go in the living room? Aunt Alexandra said at last. If you don't mind, said Mr. Tate, I'd rather us stay in here. If it won't hurt Jem any, I want to have a look at his injuries while Scout tells us about it. It's all right if I leave, she asked. I'm just one person too many in here. I'll be in my room if you want me, Atticus. Aunt Alexandra went to the door, but she stopped and turned. Atticus, I had a feeling about this tonight. This is my fault, she began. I should have... Mr. Tate held up his hand. You go ahead, Miss Alexandra. I know it's been a bit of a shock to you, and don't you fret yourself about anything. Why, if we follow our feelings all the time, we'd be like cats chasing their tails. Miss Scout, see if you can tell us what happened while it's still fresh in your mind. You think you can? Did you see him following you? I went to Atticus and felt his arms go around me. I buried my head in his lap. We started home, I said. I said to Jem I forgot my shoes. Soon as we started back for him, the lights went out, and Jem said I could get him tomorrow. Scout, rise up so Mr. Tate can hear you, Atticus said. I crawled into his lap. Then Jem said, hush a minute. I thought he was thinking he always wants me to hush so he can think. And then he said he heard something. We thought it was Cecil. Cecil? Cecil Jacobs. He scared us once tonight. We thought it was him again. He had on a sheet. They gave a quarter for best costume. I don't know who won it. Where were you when you thought it was Cecil? Just a piece from the school. I yelled something at him. You yelled what? Cecil Jacobs is a big fat hen, I think. We didn't hear nothing. Then Jem yelled, hello, or something loud enough to wake the dead. Just a minute, Scout, said Mr. Tate. Mr. Finch, did you hear them? Atticus said he didn't. He had the radio on, and Alexandra had hers on in her bedroom as well. He remembered because she told him to turn his down a bit so she could hear hers. Atticus smiled. I always play the radio too loud. I wonder if the neighbors heard anything, said Mr. Tate. I doubt it, Heck. Most of them listen to their radios or go to bed with the chickens. Maudie Atkinson may have been up, but I doubt it. Go ahead, Scout, Mr. Tate said. Well, after Jem yelled, we walked on, Mr. Tate. I was shut up in my costume, but I could hear it myself then. Footsteps, I mean. They walked when we walked, and they stopped when we stopped. Jem said he could see me because Mrs. Crenshaw put some kind of shiny paint on my costume. I was Ham. How's that? Asked Mr. Tate, startled. Atticus described my role to Mr. Tate, plus the construction of the garment. You should have seen her when she came in, he said. It was crushed to a pulp. Mr. Tate rubbed his chin. I wondered why he had those marks on him. His sleeves were perforated with little holes, and there were one or two little pin or puncture marks in his arms to match the holes. Let me see that thing if you still have it, sir. Atticus fetched the remains of the costume. Mr. Tate turned it over and bent it around to get an idea of its former shape. Thing is, this thing probably saved her life, he said. Look. He pointed with a long forefinger. A shiny, clean line stood out on the dull wire. Bob Ewell meant business, Mr. Tate muttered. So basically, the chicken wire had been covered in cloth and painted, and obviously he crushed it when he was trying to squeeze her. But the metal, which all has like an oxidized quality to it, or a patina, as metal will tend to get, where his knife had slashed, there was a bright, clean line right down the costume. So Bob Ewell didn't just try to squeeze her to death. He tried to slice her to pieces. He was a maniac. And Atticus, he's just not able to comprehend that because he's just too good of a person to even be able to imagine the mind of somebody who could murder a child. And so Atticus said he was out of his mind. I don't like to contradict him, Mr. Finch. Wasn't crazy, mean as hell, low-down skunk with enough liquor in him to make him brave enough to kill children. He'd never met you face to face. Atticus shook his head. I just can't conceive of a man who'd... Mr. Finch, there's just some kinds of people you have to shoot before you can say hi to them. Even then, they ain't worth the bullet it takes to shoot them. Ewell's is one of them. Atticus said, I thought he got it all out of himself that day he threatened me. Even if he hadn't, I thought he'd come after me. He had guts enough to pester a poor colored woman. He had guts enough to pester Judge Taylor when he thought he wasn't in his empty house. So you think he'd have met you face to face in daylight? Mr. Tate sighed. We better get on, Scout. You heard him behind you. So I want to park on that for a minute. Mr. Heck Tate said there's two kinds of people in the world. Or there's just some people in the world that you just got to shoot, and they're not even worth the bullet that you wasted on them. And that is a real departure from Atticus's view of the world. Atticus said that no one is all good or all evil. They're all mostly gray area. There's no black and no white. There's just gray with some patches of black and some patches of white. We learned that as far back as the chapter with Mrs. DuBose, who was a good woman, even though she really wasn't. She was a racist, and she was mean, and she was ornery, and she was an old curmudgeon, but she did have some noble qualities to her. So she was mostly evil with a little bit of good. And some people are mostly good with a little bit evil. And most of us are a mixture. We can do bad things, but still be good people, and we can do good things. Even bad people can do good things. But there are some people, according to Heck, that are just bad, just straight through bad. And I'm curious as to what your thoughts are on that, because I've always thought that I kind of tend to think more along the lines of Atticus. I give everybody a little bit of credibility for being human, even if they've gone through some trauma and they've had some bad things, and they do bad things. But there are some people who have done really, really bad things and would continue to do really, really bad things. So maybe, I don't know, maybe there are some people that are just too broken to be fixed. I don't know. That's a hard thing to comprehend, but it's worth thinking about. Okay, so we're going on. Yes, sir. Well, we were under the tree. How do you know you were under the tree? You couldn't see thunder. You couldn't see thunder out there. I was barefoot, and Jem says it's always cooler underneath a tree. We'll have to make him a deputy. Go ahead, then. Then all of a sudden, somebody grabbed me and mashed my costume. Think I ducked to the ground. Heard a tussling under the tree, sort of, and they were bamming against the trunk, sounded like. Jem found me and started pulling me towards the road. Somebody, Mr. Yule, yanked him down, I reckon. They tussled some more, and then there was this funny noise, and Jem hollered. I stopped. That was when Jem's arm, that must have been Jem's arm breaking. That's disturbing. I've never heard a bone break, and I don't really want to. I'm a bit squeamish. Anyway, Jem hollered, and I didn't hear no more from him. Next thing, Mr. Yule was trying to squeeze me to death, I reckon. Then somebody yanked Mr. Yule down. Jem must have got up, I guess. That's all I know. And then Mr. Tate was looking at me sharply. Somebody was staggering around, panting and coughing fit to die. I thought it was Jem at first, but it didn't sound like him, so I went looking for Jem on the ground. I thought Atticus had come to help us and had got wore out. Who was it? Why, there he is, Mr. Tate. He can tell you his name. As I said it, I half pointed to the man in the corner, but brought my arm down quickly, lest Atticus reprimand me for pointing. It was impolite to point. He was still leaning against the wall. He'd been leaning against the wall when I came into the room, his arms folded across his chest. As I pointed, he brought his arms down and pressed the palms of his hands against the wall. There were white hands, sickly white hands that had never seen the sun, so white they stood out garishly against the dull cream wall in the dim light of Jem's room. I looked from his hands to his sand-stained khaki pants. My eyes traveled up his thin frame to his torn denim shirt. His face was as white as his hands, but for a shadow of a jutting chin. His cheeks were thin to hollowness. His mouth was wide. There was a shallow, almost delicate indentation at his temples, and his gray eyes were so colorless I thought he was blind. His hair was dead and thin, almost feathery on top of his head. Sounds like this guy might be an albino. When I pointed at him, his palm slipped slightly, leaving greasy sweat streaks on the wall, and he hooked his thumbs into his belt. A strange spasm shook him, as if he heard fingernails scrape on a slate. But as I gazed at him in wonder, the tension slowly drained from his face. His lips parted into a timid smile. Our neighbor's image blurred with my sudden tears. "Hey, Boo," I said. And that's the end of chapter 29. So her savior was the last person that anybody in Maycomb would have expected to be a savior. He heard the commotion, and he ran over there. He's obviously not a healthy man. He's obviously either agoraphobic or he's got some kind of other issues. But for some reason, he chose to step up. We talked about stepping up in the previous chapter. He chose to step up, and he went out there and he saved those kids' lives. And he stabbed Bob Ewell. He got his knife away from him. He stabbed Bob Ewell, who deserved it. Nobody's going to shed a tear for that guy. So I guess the theme of this chapter, with all its brevity, is the unexpected. Because Atticus never expected Bob Ewell to try to murder his children. He just couldn't anticipate anyone being that evil. And Scout and everybody else, they would not have anticipated Arthur Boo Radley running to be a hero and rescue children from a crazy drunken maniac. Unexpected. So my question is, when have you ever experienced something completely unexpected? Tell me about it. That's my whole question. That's all I've got for you. When is a time that you've experienced something so unexpected that it was like a little bit of a mind blower? You're just like, whoa. Wow. Like, have you ever been speechless? Have you ever been so thrown off that you couldn't even comprehend what had happened? It may be a good thing, hopefully. It may be a bad thing, unfortunately. But either way, when we have that cognitive dissonance of our brains just going, what is happening? We've learned something. We've become a bigger, better person because of it, if we survive. So tell me about that. Reflect on it and talk to me about it. Give me a good bit of writing. I'm talking like 200 words or so. And that's all I've got for you on this fine Monday. So you guys take care. I'll post another assignment on Wednesday, and then we won't chat for a while. I'll post another assignment a week from Wednesday, and we'll figure it out from there. I'll tell you right now, I'm not giving you any work during exam week. There's no exams, so there's no work during exam week. So you've only got 2 weeks of school left. And one of the assignment days, Monday, is going to be no homework. So we're pretty much right on the home stretch. All right. That can't be your unexpected thing, by the way. It needs to be a little more mind-blowing than Fisher being charitable, because look at me. I'm a bastion of charitability. Is that a word? Charitability? You know what? I'm an English teacher and I said it, so that makes it a word. Okay. Speaking of which, you guys have a great day. Peace.